Your film, DeMeure, which is a very gripping film, especially the way it is presented and about a homeless man who finds a home in the end, or through the film, different homes, and you tell the story in a wonderful way. Shall we have a clip first?
Okay.
Ouais. Ça va mieux toujours. Yeah.
Fais-moi c'est bien, comme ça. Enfin, tout est petit.
Le petit?
Oui. Moi, je...
Ah oui, comment? Ah oui, ici doit être en grand.
Well, when I saw your film for the first time, I thought this film is against any cinematic law. It's about a long shots where obviously, well, seemingly nothing is happening. And that's the story, because it gives you the feeling of loneliness, of getting lost, of getting slipping away. Any Hollywood filmer would say, well, we don't pay you any money for making this film, because there's no subject. But the subject is hit on the head the way you do it. So, why did you want to make a film about a man who's lonely in his house? Why? Where did it come
Good
from?
question. Well, as Ariana, yes,
Yeah.
I'm a researcher first, and I have worked with homeless people before. I've made inquiries and research on that, and I've made more participatory project with it. So that's how I met this man. And like as I said, you don't always know why you want to make a film. And sometimes it's just an encounter that makes you subject of the film also. So I think it's plural things that came together and that made me make this film about this man.
Yeah. You told before that this is your first film.
Mm-hmm.
You had no experience in filmmaking, so it was sheer intuition that you decided to do it this way, with these long shots?
Yes, I think it's also because I didn't know how to film first, so like it was too hard for me to go with the camera and do stuff, but also I think aesthetically I wanted something more like distant, and I didn't want, like, I was very much preoccupied by how do I represent him and what can I say as a filmmaker about someone else's story. So the whole film is also about intimacy and publicity, and you have that glass window where people see themselves inside. So it was a big question about how to make something about someone that has had a tough life, but without doing something that would go into miserabilism or more like sentimentalism, even if the film has kind of an emotional development.
There is, because he starts to speak more and more, and in the end he dies.
Mm-hmm.
So you were waiting for him to, or could you finish the film without him dying, or was there I mean, that must have been a shock after spend so many time with him.
Yes, it was really hard, I must say. Well, when I started filming, I knew it could happen because it's very classical that people that have lived on the streets die once they have an apartment, like after some time, very often after 1 year and a half or 2 years, like it happens. Because life on the streets, it's so tough, and people on the street are very much people from the lower class, and they live less than educated people.
Not by choice.
Sorry?
Not by choice. They don't
Yeah,
live
yeah,
on the
of course,
street.
of course, of
No.
course. So I knew it could happen, but I didn't know it would in the end. So it was like a rush, and then of course I wasn't thinking finishing the film this way. I thought that I would finish it with the moving of the apartment, because he wasn't feeling at home in this supervised apartment.
Yeah. So I see a lot of similarities between Doel and your film, both situated in Belgium, because you see the framing and the way the subject is approached, the emptiness, the appearing, a losing of life, one could say. Whereas your film is almost silent, you see these funny things happening in Doel with driving. These boys driving motors, etc. It's funny that two complete different. You're a more trained filmmaker, and a starter in the field come with the same approach. So, in a way, the subject defines the way of filming.
Yeah, I mean, in my case, I think I haven't seen your film. I would love. I think it looks great, but. Yeah, to some extent, but I think it is also an aesthetic choice. As I mean, like that. Of course, if you're shooting, like let's say a film that takes place in Aleppo during the bombardment, it's difficult to stage everything and say let's do that shot again. Of course, when you're in such a serious, a critical location, you have to, I guess, just pursue your subject or your idea of the film. Whereas if you do a more, in my case, a slow portrait, which has been taking a long time to build up trust and funding for the film, it also makes sense to make more clear sort of aesthetic choices. So, yes, I agree to some extent, but not necessarily.
Long shots in this sense, with a fixed frame, tend to be give the information of being objective, as if the filmmaker went away and the camera was still on, and it observes and it observes, and then something will happen in the end. Like the objectivity of archive footage, you find it, you think they give information, but they bring emotion. Like the objectivity of the fixed camera, you think it's just what we see, but it's emotion behind. Is that a knowledge that we could share?
I mean,
go ahead.
In my case, we specifically worked with that. We had with sort of this what we call the before and after technique, which basically meant that we would the camera crew, we would start shooting before our characters were ready, and sometimes when I would say cut, we would actually continue to shoot, because there are these in between. There's like, at least with our characters, at first they're aware of the camera, and then they act in a special way because I'm on camera, and then you tell them they're not on camera, and then you get something else. So what we did, we actually mixed scenes where they're aware of the camera, that we're rolling, and other scenes they don't, and that gives an intentional doubt whether it's staged or not. At least a lot of people who see it, they consider it almost as a fiction film because they feel that it's very staged, but actually it's both.
It's both. And in your film, was he still aware after all that long period that the camera was on?
I think he was, but he didn't care at all, so it was kind of easy. And also for me, because I started to take part of the daily activities in the apartment, like making coffee and doing the dishwashing and so on. So it was also a way for me not to be just the one behind the camera, but just be with him at other moment than being filming.
But all your 3 films are about loss. Is that a connection that comes with the knowledge of the built environment? A connection that we could lose something? That's a philosophical question.
That's very good.
I think in my case, it's more to do with, even if it's not in the film itself, but to the way that, for example, this person has been, how do you say that in English? He's, like, we don't allow him to build his own environment like the way he wants to. So they're like people with lower income and so on, and they don't have the power to choose for themselves what they want to do. So I don't know if I answered your question.
No. Yeah.
In my case, or in the case with Doel, that if you make a film about home, which it's basically about someone claiming that this is their home, of course home represents some kind of potential loss. I mean, because growing up and moving out and things develop, so it represents a potential loss or a nostalgic look at something where you came from. And in the case of Doel, both in a narrow context but also in a broader context, the inhabitants, they cling on to an idea of something that used to be a town, because that's, for them it is something that they don't want to lose. But if you're looking at it from the outside, maybe they already lost it, because it's not a town anymore, it's an abandoned town. So there's definitely, like for the characters, they are clinging on to something they don't want to lose, which they maybe to some extent already have lost.
More and more now that film is very matured after 100 years of filmmaking, more and more people are making use of archives. And do you think that that there is a second opinion about how we live, and that we need those archives to understand how we live, how we really live?
I think archives, at least for me in this long project, they can teach you a lot of things. In this case, to me, they were really important because they taught me that the origin of this struggle was everywhere and nowhere was impossible to find, even in an historical way and in a geographical way. So it teach me the dissemination of the origin and also of the end of the struggle, because it's unfinished and can be accomplished. So it allows to respect this non-linearity of history and this complexity of levels of history. So this is one of the many possibilities of the archives. And it's also taught me to not trust too much to the images. So this game of disjuncting video and sounds, it was not easily accepted by people, but because it's really manipulation, but intentional, but really a strong manipulation.
With a good reason, a reason you can tell.
Yes, and it's for a cinematic reason, which means that I think the sound, the image has to struggle one with the other all the time, has to be in a dialectical dialogue. At the same time, it taught me that we can't trust images. I mean, you said before that we can manipulate history and everything else with archive, but the problem is that the image, we can do it with every image. Every image is an archive from yesterday at the same time. So even the image of yesterday are already an archive. So it's not a problem that footage are in danger or they can be a dangerous tool, but every image can be, of course. So it's just by using image we can. So we don't have to trust it. That's why the sound is very important to me, and also adding everything, adding text and adding the research, and explaining it also whenever it's possible.
Last question. Now that you've all dealt with houses of others, how do you look at your own house now? Did it change? You took the vacuum cleaner and said, I gotta protect it more, or
No,
Or are
but
you
I
more-
think if you do a film about home, obviously it's a question that's important to you, but I guess it's important for everyone. Like, I don't know, is it Bachelard or Bart who says that it's thinking about all your homes and the places you've been makes you be more into yourself kind of thing?
yeah. Well, if you see a film about people loving each other, maybe you think about your own relations and well, I should be more kind to her or him or.
But for me, it was actually kind of the opposite almost, because I don't have a strong connection to where I was born and raised. I grew up in a suburb of Copenhagen, and I don't feel very emotional when I go there. My parents still live there, but I don't have a strong connection to it. So maybe I got fascinated by the opposite, that they're so keen on clinging on to something. Because to me, I mean, I don't care so much about home. My own apartment with my family, yeah. But so I think it was the opposite actually for me.
Not the search for home. It's
No, more like an interest in why they are so keen on and why it's so important for them.
that's interesting.
The opposite in my film. I think it's the opposite in my film. He doesn't care at all, and it's very important to me. So I go and see
We
someone
should
that's
exchange films.
yeah.
There you are. Well, thank you very much for coming and telling about your films. And I hope we can meet you again the upcoming years with new films. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.